We'll do this. I'll give a little, a 30-second overview, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Peck, who is a retired colleague of these folks and can introduce them better than I probably. So he knows the roles. So I think we've got, we have Bob Tess, who's the Chief Financial and Business Services Officer. We have Angie Lloyd, who we know, who is our People Services Director for the Wausau School District. And we have Diana White, who is the Communications Coordinator at the school district. I think we may have some other attendees just kind of listening in, but I think those are going to be the presenters. And if you saw my email, you may have gotten a little preview of this. The Wausau School District, there's going to be a referendum, two referendum questions, or two questions on the referendum coming up in April. And these folks were kind enough to offer to come give us a little background presentation and answer questions about it. So Dr. Peck, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that was a really great introduction. I just would also like to introduce Mr. John Uding, who's with us. He's the Director of Technology for the district. And it's just great to have representatives of the Wausau School District with us today. This is a very important referendum for the community. And I think once you hear the facts about what this referendum includes, as well as their availability to answer any questions you might have, I think you'll see that this is just an excellent opportunity for student learning in the Wausau School District. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues from the Wausau School District.
Thanks, Brad.
So much.
Oh, Diana, are you gonna start?
Yeah, I can, or you can too.
I'll start and then I'll hand it over to you real quickly. I'm Bob Tess. I'm the Chief Finance Officer for the district. Thank you, Rotary, for this opportunity to share some of the facts with you and create an opportunity to maybe answer some of your questions as well. When we went back to the drawing board in November, after a failed referendum attempt in November, we talked to a lot of community members. We met with many of them. We met with all of our PTOs, and we asked them, what would you like to see out of a referendum question? What did you like or didn't you like about the last one? What did you think about our communication efforts, and what can we change there? And one thing we heard loud and clear was, I didn't know this, I didn't know that, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. There was a lot of I didn't know. I didn't know it was zero tax impact. I didn't know it was affecting every school in our district. But at the same time, we heard, you've got to make it short. You've got to make it short and sweet and give us these quick hitters and we can formulate our own opinions. So as contradictory as both of those are, it was difficult, but I will apologize if I'm too long-winded. I can't do anything about that. But if I'm too short and you are left wanting more, we created a website. And in that website, we've got more information than anybody would ever need. It starts with wausauschools.org. That's our normal website. And if you go off to the right, there's a big green link that takes you to a separate referendum website. And in that referendum website, there will be broken down by each individual school, what's happening at that school, how many dollars are being invested in that school. We've got some videos, we've got pictures, we've got all kinds of stuff on that website. So we're going to be going out in the community and giving people a taste of what this referendum is all about, but at the same time, pointing them in that direction so they can seek out more information as they desire. So with that, how about if I turn it over to you, Diana, and you take a couple slides and then I'll jump in a little while.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Bob. So what I'm going to give you a very high level view of our strategic plan, because these referenda questions that you'll find on the ballot on April 6th really fit into our strategic plan, which is called Whole Child, Whole Wausau. But really what this referendum does is it expands pupil services supports, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. It provides equity for all of our students. We can optimize our resources, we can enhance our service, and we can really create safe and comfortable world-class schools. So this all fits into that strategic plan that we here in the district really pride ourselves on. So let's look at these questions in a little bit more detail. We're going to start high level and kind of work our way in. But again, these questions create full pupil services teams for each of our schools, which is really important, especially throughout this pandemic. But it also creates learning spaces that really fit our teaching methods. It would allow us to provide safety, security, and accessibility upgrades, which are really important in our schools. And then it also allows us to do building improvements. We're talking improvements to about 20 schools, which is a lot. And it also allows us to take care of some maintenance needs as well. So as Bob mentioned, really after November, we went out in the community to find out what they would like to see in these referendum questions. And here are some of the key takeaways. We're not going to build any new schools. This is really about making improvements to each of our current schools. We will not balance enrollments in this plan. We've reduced the overall cost, putting more work into our buildings for still no tax impact. And what is really important to note is that, we've had a lot of people tell us and ask us, why now in a pandemic? Why go to referendum? Well, it's important to note that our needs will not go away. And in reality, the more that we push them off, the more it's going to cost us in the future to make those necessary upgrades and maintenance repairs, things like that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bob as we get into a little bit more detail with these two referenda questions.
Thank you, Diana. Here are the two questions that will be asked. And being the finance guy, I can't stop from saying that we're going to do this with zero tax impact. And some question me on the word impact, and does that mean it's free? It absolutely does not mean it's free. It is not free. We're borrowing $148.8 million in question number 2. We're going to phase that over several borrowings, pay it back over 20 or 22 years. Question 1 is exceeding the revenue limit by $4 million. Don't confuse zero tax impact with these are free to taxpayers. They are not free to taxpayers. We just happen to be coordinating with some debt retirement that we've worked hard to coordinate over the last 4 years. And that debt retirement is happening perfectly to introduce these two questions so the tax impact is zero. And it's one statement to say the mill rate impact is zero, but it's a much stronger statement to say the amount of tax is zero. So we would actually expect our mill rate to go down a little bit while taxing the same amount. Question 1, that's an operating referendum. We've been living under the same revenue limit in Wisconsin since 1993, and Wausau voters have never allowed us to exceed that revenue limit. So hopefully in April, the voters will say exceed that revenue limit by $4 million. And the heart and soul of this question is to offer full pupil services teams in every one of our elementary schools. Angie Lloyd could say much more about what full pupil service teams are. We're going to get to a couple slides that speak to that a little bit, but also in question number 1, it allows us to weather some instability in state budgets that come our way, in operational funds that sometimes don't come our way through certain biennial budgets and come our way to a different degree in other biennial budgets. It allows us to stabilize that throughout various budgets. The second question is borrowing $148.8 million for facility improvements. And we're going to talk about that a little bit on subsequent slides as well. Question number 1 is for the operational revenue, $4 million. And I'm not going to read the question for you, but we'd be remiss if we didn't tell you exactly what that question looks like. Next slide. So the $4 million is to address pupil service teams and pupil service needs in all of our schools for all of our students, increase academic achievement for our diverse learners, and all of our learners address positive behaviors through behavior interventionists and other support, and address mental health needs of our learners, and not just for certain students, but all students. So the $4 million, in addition to stabilizing the budget, would provide these teams, and we're proposing adding, I've got the number here, 16 certified staff and 19 support staff. And additionally, that is stimulating the economy. Those are local jobs that would come to Wausau School District employees as it gets phased in over the next couple of years. Angie, would you have anything more to add on this slide?
Sure. I can explain, and Diana, I don't know if the next slide tells exactly what the pupil services teams are. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit about pupil services teams and what that exactly means. Back when all of us were in school, what pupil services meant was a guidance counselor that you saw once a month. And then as you got to high school, they kind of helped you plan for either career or college. So that has changed actually quite a bit. Brad Peck can probably speak to the exact timeline of when things changed in the realm of pupil services. But I would say in the past decade at least, we've been seeing a change in our students and really in society. So what we're seeing now is that we need more supportive services in order for students to be able to navigate their education and their home and social lives than they've ever needed before for a variety of reasons. We currently have school social workers, school counselors, and school psychologists in our schools, but we're not near where they are at. Our staffing levels are not even close to where they can be effective in what they're doing. So it's a lot of reactionary stuff at this time. So just to give you a picture of what we currently have, social workers, we have 9.8 of them for 22 schools and programs. So often our social workers are between 2 and 3 buildings, which is not effective. They're spread way too thin to even be able to start addressing some of the needs that we have. We're in the same boat with our counselors and our school psychologists as well. So we're looking to up those teams of people so that we would have at least 1 school social worker, 1 school psychologist, and at least 1 at elementary level school counselor in each building. That would be a great increase from what we currently have. And I'll explain a couple of the reasons why we need that in the next slide. Oh, sorry. I guess I'm still explaining that. Can you go back, Diana? Sorry. Thank you. So we've done a lot of kind of assessment on why things have been changing and why we would need more of these services. We do know that a lot of it stems from the drug problems in our area. We know that a lot of our students are coming from homes where there is constant trauma and crisis. And we do know that we have to teach students skills such as self-regulation pretty specifically the moment they enter 4K or kindergarten. So those are some of the skills that a long time ago we would see kids come to school already having those skills. Now we have to explicitly teach them in a school setting. There is a great article that came out in the City Pages just on Friday. And it actually, they followed around a school psychologist, school counselor, and a social worker from one of our buildings to really see what happens in a day. So that gives you a lot more information. I think it's a 2 or 3 page piece in City Pages that just came out where it explains specifically what each of those positions do every day in our buildings.
Thanks, Angie. That's question number 1. That will appear on the ballot, $4 million operational money recurring for pupil services teams and budget stabilization. Question number 2, next slide, is to borrow $148.8 million to improve our facilities. And it's important for people to understand, and I've gotten this question many, many, many times, why doesn't the district just put away money to fix your buildings? And taxpayers don't necessarily like the idea of taxing and putting money into a savings account and taxing and putting money into a savings account. Furthermore, the state funding system is not set up to do that. The state funding system and the legislators clearly made a decision in 1993 that these decisions should be left to local school districts, whether they want to invest in their schools or not. So there's not money in the regular operational budget to build new school buildings, address significant deferred maintenance costs that get away, improvements to your facilities. We go to referendum for that. Of the $148.8 million, there's the question itself. Every single school is going to be touched. Either improvements made or additions in some cases. In addition to the only new building is the Environmental Learning Center at the school forest. It's about $3.75 million of that 148.8 million. And also important to note that the school foundation is working hard on generating some private donations and some money to help tackle some of that cost. In fact, they already made a donation of $84,000 to run more robust electrical service to the school forest that we would need no matter whether this referendum passes or not. Right now, the district is investing about $400,000 on fiber going to the school forest that we would need whether we have a referendum or not. But in this referendum, we would build a new environmental learning center at the school forest. Next slide. If we talk about three different areas for this investment, safety and security is the first one. Safety and security, as a matter of fact, let's just hit all of these because we've got a slide for each one of them. Safety and security, we need to improve the layout of our buildings and some of the systems inside of our buildings for improved safety and security. Deferred maintenance is just that. It's maintenance that has gotten away because our operational budget doesn't support enough money to fix all of these things. We've got $1 million district-wide, 20 buildings. We've got $1 million in our capital improvement campaign every single year. Just not enough. And then learning spaces, changing the spaces themselves to improve learning. How about the next slide, Dan? I think we hit each one of these. Safety and security. When we talk about safety and security, upper left, maybe you recognize that space, that's Wausau West. When you come into the building, you don't have to necessarily go right into the office. We want to take every one of our schools and configure it in such a way that visitors coming in from the outside are forced into an office or at least a vestibule where they get paged into the office. We're doing that with every one of our schools. Parent bus drop-off and parking patterns, especially at John Muir and Hawthorne Hills, we're making some significant improvements on separating the two traffic flows and improving the outside of our building. We're also adding some parking lots and some other spaces in some of our other buildings. ADA accessibility, improving our accessibility in many of our buildings. Emergency systems, there's a picture of the clock, the PA and the fire alarm all in one. Those are called life safety systems. These have really deteriorated over the district over the years, especially the PA system that we depend upon. Fire alarm, instant notification. Some of those things would be improved throughout the district. Next slide talks about the deferred maintenance. Of the $148.8 million, about 54 million, over a third of it is for deferred maintenance. Improvements to HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, building repairs inside and out, doors that have deteriorated, windows, exterior asphalt surfaces, classroom technology, some technology that we just couldn't afford to keep up with the times. We'd make those necessary improvements. Next slide, learning space needs. Angie Lloyd talked about some of our pupil services staff. We also need the space for those pupil services staff to actually perform their job instead of somewhere in the hallway or a broom closet or some other space that was kind of repurposed for that need. Separated gym and a cafeteria. All of our elementary schools do not have a separate gym and cafeteria. And when we lack one of each, it really makes for scheduling nightmares at those schools. Larger flexible learning spaces to accommodate 21st century learning and how it takes place today. Aging classrooms, just repair and remodel some of them, improving the lighting and improve that learning environment that our students are entitled to be in a modern learning environment. And we're also addressing some additional space as well, especially on the west side, most notably in our Statine Elementary neighborhood and our South Mountain Elementary neighborhood. We did a study with Applied Populations Lab out of UW-Madison. They're suggesting some enrollment growth in those two areas in particular. So we'd be adding on to those two schools. Again, keeping with my short and sweet, and you can go elsewhere to find more information. We do have every one of our schools listed on our website and specifically what we're improving and the dollar amounts that we're investing in each one of those schools. The cost of the investment, this is my favorite, right? Zero. And as I said earlier, nobody's going to think that it literally costs $0 to borrow $148 million. but it does create a stable tax rate. And the school district and the board and myself and everybody included has worked very hard long before the pandemic to create this opportunity for a referendum this year that could be passed. And we tried it in November, and the same holds true for the April referendum. Create an opportunity where the community could pass 2 referendum questions and keep that tax rate stable. Essentially, the falling off debt is going to be equal to the new debt and the operational question number 1, and it shouldn't change any. Here's just a picture of that. And this begs the question, what would happen with a couple of failed referenda? And you might notice that light purple prior referendum debt drops off significantly after this year. But if both of those referendum questions would fail, or even if one of them would fail, we would take that purple prior referendum debt and we would probably pile it up in 21, 22. And the reason we would do that, everybody likes their taxes to go down, but everybody likes stable taxes as well. And when your mill rate drops, the following year your aid drops and it makes your mill rate go back up again. And I think we've done a nice job over the years of creating a pretty stable mill rate, so your taxes would not drop down as abruptly as some might think with a failed referendum. It would take a couple of years, and then yes, it could go down a couple dollars. Why now? The needs aren't going away. The last time we passed a significant referendum for district-wide maintenance, we did a little one in 2015, a couple $1 million district-wide, didn't go very far. I believe the last time before that was 1999. We passed a referendum with some district-wide maintenance. The needs are not going away. Every single year we wait, inflation with construction takes its toll. Maintain stable tax rate. We've worked on that for 3 years and we've set ourselves up for now being the perfect time for this referendum. And also interest rates are at an all-time low. If you're trying to refinance your home, you're seeing that in rates that are 2%. School bonds have been issued in the last month at less than 2%. The assumption I'm making is actually 2.5%. That's a very, very conservative assumption, but those are still historic lows in interest rates.
Bob, can I just add one more thing for the why now?
Absolutely.
So before the pandemic hit, we were already talking about increasing pupil services staff to kind of meet the demand of what our society and what our kids need right now. The pandemic has amplified those needs 1,000 times. So we don't want to attach additional pupil services teams to pandemic as a reason for needing them, but it's certainly going to increase why we need them. So any of those kids, you know, we haven't seen some kids for almost a year now, and they're in very dire situations. And we know there's going to be a tidal wave of kids coming who need additional supports after being isolated in their home or being in horrible situations for the last year. So I just wanted to make that clear. It's not because of pandemic that we're adding pupil services, but it's certainly going to have a benefit after we've gone through a global pandemic.
Yes, thank you, Angie. And that also reminded me of one other thing to mention on this slide. We're learning from some neighbor schools and some schools from throughout the state that the construction industry is very hungry for work right now. We could benefit from a competitive bidding environment if we were doing some projects now. There are a lot of projects in the private sector that are being postponed right now, and we would benefit from a very competitive construction environment that we're seeing in other districts. The next slide does take us through the timeline, and you can't do this amount of work immediately. We don't do a lot of the design work up front because we don't know what the answer is going to be from the community. So we have done some planning, we've done some budgeting, we haven't done any of the official engineering and architectural design work. That probably takes 16 to 18 months to really do, and then you do it in phases, whichever ones are the probably easiest to engineer and the easiest to build, you maybe do first. And by 2025, you'd spend the last of the bond money. And that also offers an opportunity to phase in the borrowing. You wouldn't have to issue bonds all at once. You could issue bonds 2 or maybe even 3 times and help the taxpayers with lesser interest rates or interest amounts. So that's our slideshow. And And there is a lot of information on our website, and I did go through it pretty quickly. But with that, we have as much time as you really want to spend with us answering any questions that we have. We do have a couple others on the line also. Tabitha Gundrum, she's our HR director. I see Wendy Cartilage out there. She's our director of special ed. I don't know who else. Steve Schoner is a partner we're working with from Nexus Solutions, and they're helping us with some of the construction side of this of our plan. But we'll answer any questions you have for us. We'll stick around as long as we have to.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bob. Are there questions that club members have?
Bob, this is John, one of our club members. Thank you for coming, and this whole team who've put a lot of thought into this. I think this must be one of the steps you're taking to present this information throughout the community. I guess I consider myself generally well-read. I don't recall seeing this kind of information for the last referendum, but it certainly makes a big difference to have it. But my question relates to your first referendum about the $4 million for operating. Is that a one-time access for those funds? Because if they're supporting individuals, new staff members, those staff members aren't going to be there for 1 year. They're going to be there year after year. So how is that going to be supported?
Correct. Thank you for that question, John. That's a very important distinction to make. This is called a recurring operational question. A recurring operational question means you're giving the district the authority to exceed the revenue limit by $4 million each of the next forever years. Typically, if a district goes through a normal budget cycle, you might see $200 being added by the state legislature per student. With 8,000 students, we could be talking about $1.6 million in a normal budget cycle being added every year. So this would increase that up to $4 million. And that one fits in also. We've got expiring debt that's going to go down about $13.5 million. And we're going to replace that with about $9.5 million of borrowing and the $4 million in exceeding the revenue limit. And that's how 13.5 million will go away and another 13.5 million would be introduced. And important also to understand, we do get aid on that spending. We're a positively aided district, and we get about 20% aid from the state.
Could you share with us the general metrics for the district? You know, I don't know what census is or your projection for growth, or you know, there must be industry metrics on what the expenses per student are for these types of things. I just don't know where Wausau School District is relative to how we compare with the various metrics that would help you understand, you know, where we're at on all that.
Yep, I deal with metrics. That's my most favorite part of my job. I look at it all day, every day. And I compare to other local districts and other statewide districts. And I will tell you this, the Wausau School District does have operational costs that are a little bit higher than most districts our size. And there are a couple of reasons for that. In Wausau, we have a lot of small elementary schools that our community has come out and said they want to maintain. They like the fact that we have 8,000 students in 13 elementary schools. That's probably 3 or 4 more than a typical district our size. And we also have a population in Wausau where we are on the high side of free reduced students. We are on the high side of special needs students. We are on the high side of English learner students. And we've got a demographic that sometimes is a little bit more expensive to serve in Wausau. So in Wausau, it's not crazy higher than everybody else, but when we look at our metrics, it does cost a little bit more to educate a student in Wausau than in many other districts.
I have a question. I know the last time around, the feedback that I picked up on was that, especially for parents, hey, nobody asked our opinion, even though I know you did. There was a lot of surveying and everything that was done. For this project, what do you anticipate is what's the the approach to have parents feel like they are being heard, because that seemed to be that seemed to come back against the school district last time, that even though it wasn't necessarily true, I think people lost sight of the fact that those surveys weren't maybe the way that they wanted to be heard. So I guess that's just a question.
Yeah, thank you. That it's almost like me hearing today that 10 zillion people watched the Super Bowl yesterday, and I said, hey, Nielsen never called me. How do they know if I watched it or not? So we do trust a little bit of sampling. We do scientific sampling. And I like to remind people, we started to learn what the community wanted from this 2020-2021 referendum back in 2015. In 2015, we sent out a survey to everybody in town. We said, what do you want out of your referendum? And we built the referendum question in 2015 that built the additional 4K academies. The affordability level was much lower. So many things that we learned from the community, we had to put off to the side, but yet we learned them. Dr. Hiltz, when he came on board, he did countless listening sessions with a lot of different groups. Every time I'm out in the community, you just gain a little bit of intel. You talk to somebody, you learn what they want, you read the paper, you tune in on different conversations. You're continuously learning what the community wants from their schools. In the 2020 failed referendum, I think we did 3 community surveys, 500 people each. Now, you might say that's not a lot of people, but it is scientifically representative of our community. 500, 500, 500. After the failed referendum in November, we did another one with 600 because we wanted a big enough N to represent those that voted for it and those that voted against it. So 300, 300 were accurate scientific representations of the people that voted for it and what they thought, and the people that voted against it, what they thought. We tune in when people talk to the board. The board sent, people send emails to the boards. They send emails to me. We listen to talk radio. We do all of these different things. After the failed 2020 referendum, we sat down with each and every one of our PTOs and our principals. Brad, you can attest to this. You have a tuned in ear to what the East community wants. And we learn that through you in all the times that I talk to you about district-wide issues. So we do talk to more people than maybe some realize. They are representative. When we think about Grant, we proposed tearing down Grant and building a new Grant in November. It didn't go so well. A lot of people were very opposed to that. The people that put the city alderman in office told the alderman to vote 11-0, I think it was, or 11-1 to keep Grant and have it be in a historical building and get historical designation. I went to all of those meetings and listened to the comments, and they put decision makers in office by voting for them, and they voted to keep Grant historic building. So thanks, Jeff. There's a lot that went into this, and listening to all kinds of different stakeholders in a lot of different ways that people maybe don't realize. And that's just me. Dr. Hiltz is listening to a whole different group of people, and everybody else on our administrative team as well.
Bob, excuse me, this is Debbie. I'd be curious as to what some of our youth Rotars that are with us today are thinking about this. This isn't going to affect them necessarily. They'll be graduated, but I'd really like to hear some of their thoughts about this too. Gang?
One question that might get them thinking is, would it be, at the high school level, we have school counselors who help a lot with career and academic planning, college planning, but we don't necessarily have counselors that are just there to help with mental health issues or trauma or just even some social issues that are going on. Would it be beneficial to have counselors that were just dedicated to some of those really tough things that kids go through and helping them through that?
Okay, so I go to Everest, and we have counselors that are for like the academic stuff, like you said. And then I think we also have a psychologist that is always on campus to like help with that kind of stuff. But I feel like it would be beneficial to have both, because I haven't had to like go to my counselor much, but for someone that like wants to talk to someone not really about the career stuff, because our counselors are definitely more like career oriented, it might be harder to talk to them if that's what you're used to talking to them about, and then you want to talk about something more personal.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? And keep in mind, we did a lot of these in November. We really did. And some of them weren't very well attended. In fact, this would be a huge group right now. But this is the first of our April 2021 presentation. So if it sounded a little clunky, tune in again in a month and you'll maybe see something totally different. And also, in the name of gathering intel, every one of these, we learn something from the group that slightly adjusts what we say to the next group. So we try to keep it consistent, but there's always a little something. Is there anything that we can add to the next presentation that would improve it?
Bob, Jim Campbell, I just had a question. If I'm an average voter who will not see this presentation or not go on your website, and I go into the voting booth in April, and I see the two referendum questions, is there a precursor or an intro paragraph that tells me that there is no tax effect with these expenditures?
We would love to put that on the ballot itself, but that's not allowed. So we've got to tell the community in short sound bites that are easy for people like you guys to repeat. And, you know, the elevator speech, listen, this is right for kids and it's an investment in our community, and our schools are strong, our community's strong, and our business environment's strong, and our homes hold their value, and all those things, and we can do it with zero tax impact because we've managed our old debt, and our old debt is falling off at just the right time to bring in this new investment. We're not wasting money. We're doing things very mindfully, but we can repeat that as often as we like, but we really can't put it on the ballot itself.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because, you know, the average Joe looks at the 4 million, said, I got to live within my budget. Why should I vote for the school district to exceed theirs? And $148 million. Holy mackerel, you know, unless they hear it or see it, which most won't.
You're right.
And that makes these referendums very challenging if you can't put that information on the ballot.
I could not agree more. That's why we're really trying to get out there. We're sending out mailings. We're doing some radio spots. We're getting our principals involved in some videos, because when people see your principal, think if I'm an East High School parent and I see Brad Peck, now I'm tuned in, right? Now I'm listening because I recognize him and he's a trusted voice. So we're getting principals involved. We're doing a full-on information campaign, and our communication efforts we've tripled down on them since November.
Okay. The other thought I had is one thing that every parent, grandparent is concerned about, obviously, is security in the school systems. And I saw that's one of the areas that you're improving, that someone can't just walk into the school without being stopped and registered and so forth. But that's an area that I would really focus on. What kind of hardware have you implemented? What kind of software? How fast can a specific school that is under an imminent threat, that everyone in that school gets the information immediately and then an egress to a safe and secure location within that school? That I think is something that parents are very concerned about. And obviously that spikes when we get a national news about a school being breached with active shooters or whatever.
That is a very good point. Thank you for that. We also know from our demographic studies, we have about 2/3 of our voters don't have students in schools. So we've got 2/3 of our voters that want to hear exactly that message. They want to know that the students that are in the buildings are safe. They want to know we're protecting our investment. It improves overall crime
Yes.
rates across the city, or property values for homeowners, or
Absolutely.
vibrant business community? Thank you.
And I know 2 veterans that are on this call that would volunteer their time to patrol the parking lots. Isn't that right, Dr. Beck? Thank you,
for the
Bob.
offer.
Can I address a question to any of the school representatives present? Obviously, we've been living in a year of I don't know what percentage now of children at home or not in the school buildings, which are sitting there, so to speak, and there's certainly less census there. Is the school anticipating that we'll be going back to normal at some point in time so that the dollars spent will be put to good work? Or how much change in our future has this whole study at home thing been teaching us about whether an ongoing hybrid option is still likely? Or, how do you look into the crystal ball a little bit and figure out what that means? What do you forecast? It's probably somewhat related to your referendum, but still it's about investing in capital structures and capital items. But how much ongoing virtual do we think continues or would be feasible?
Sure, I'll start, and I see Angie unmuted. So I was never been so happy to see somebody unmute than that right there. Angie, nice job. But the capital improvements, if we think about when the schools are going to get back to normal, they're going to get back to normal. We're going to get back to normal, and the capital improvements to our buildings will not happen for another couple of years. So by the time we have the additional space and the improvements to our buildings, we'll be back to normal, in our opinion. Now, Angie, you can talk to how this pandemic has really highlighted some of the needs in our buildings, and now they're greater than they've ever been.
Yeah, so I can tell you that even kids who maybe started off a little more successful on virtual learning, I get calls from parents every day saying, can my child get back into in-person learning? It's no longer working. So I think there's space for virtual learning for sure, even hybrid learning, but I think a lot of kids and their families have found out that in-person learning is really vital to their education. And I see a lot of the young Rotarians on here shaking their heads yes too. So what we found out along the way is even if kids can learn very well online, that social piece, incredibly important to kids, to adults, to everybody. So I would say that even if we do have virtual learners, we would probably still need a space within our building so they can socialize and have lunch with their friends and those types of things. So I don't anticipate that we're going to have less kids in our buildings in the future due to virtual learning.
Okay, any last questions for our speakers? Brad?
Mine's really not a question. It's just a statement. As Rotarians, we have a motto. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all? I think that the presentation we heard today fits each one of those components. And, in this pandemic, it has been so difficult to get out and talk to people because you can't have focus group meetings. So as Mr. Test talked and spoke about, people are talking to school district personnel. I can tell you this. I'm retired from the Wausau School District. And as I look around at the screens, so many of you are products of the Wausau School District, or you had your children attend schools in the Wausau School District. I will forever be proud to say that I retired from the Wausau School District and I worked at the Wausau School District. But it's about trust. Whenever you see questions in a referendum, it comes down to trust. And when you think about that, how is trust established? Well, trust is established based on people you interact with. Do you feel they really listen to you? Do they care? And what has their previous past behavior been like? As Rotarians, I think we have an obligation to get out and spread the word based on what we've heard. I can tell you this, now that I'm a taxpayer, okay, and retired. The Wausau School District has a track record with their finances. It's impeccable and it's transparent. You can go to different websites. You can talk to Bob Tess. He'll explain things to you. But how the Wausau School District has managed finances, it's been impeccable. And the product, what it's created is a learning environment for graduates that we should be very, very proud of. Our community has an outstanding school district, and the DC Everest School District, the Catholic schools. We should be so proud of what we have. However, we can't get away from the fact that our needs are changing, and they have changed. I experienced that. The mental health challenges that our teachers face today, we've never had to face before. And then you pile a pandemic on top of that. So what we need with pupil services is what we need to make sure that all students, equity, all students get the best education that they can receive. It boils down to this: the quality of the teacher in the classroom, having what he or she needs to do their job to help each student reach their full potential. As I look around at everybody that's here from this district representing you today, or representing the district today, I can tell you this: you can trust them. They are student-centered. They are financially centered for this community, and they want what's best for students. And in order for us to be able to provide what's best for students, we need some upgrades. We need additional staff to help those students with those special needs. And so I'll close this out because I could go on for all afternoon. I will just say that I hope that you will vote for this referendum. I hope that you will pass the word on to your colleagues, your family, your friends on the information that you heard today. And if you have additional questions, I know that they are so accessible. You can talk to any one of them: John, Diana, Bob, Angie, some of the others that are here that I haven't had the privilege of meeting formally yet. But the Wausau School District wants to meet the needs of our students in our community and have a school district that we can all be proud of, but also have world-class graduates to get out there and change this world positively. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Brad. And district representatives, I think he might have some spare time. Maybe you want to put him on retainer or something. I'm not sure. No, thanks, Brad. Well spoken, well stated, as usual. So, well, we're at 1 o'clock. I think that will do it. Thank you on behalf of the Rotary Club of Wausau. We appreciate you coming, giving this presentation. Very informative. We'll look forward to seeing more in the more information in public as we move on towards April. So. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And check out the website, a lot more information.
Okay, we'll close our meeting with our four-way test. Sean Wright is going to say that. Brad kind of stole his thunder a little bit, but Sean will do a nice job of taking us home with the four-way test. So
I won't do as good a job as Brad, but I'll try. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
All right. Thanks, Sean. Have a good week, everybody. Take care. Bye.